Hello and welcome. I'm Debbie Georgatos. Thank you so much for tuning into my show, America, Can We Talk? Today we're going to talk about three stories. One, hidden reasons for Representative Amash's call for impeachment, you won't believe. Number two, Spygate, truth is emerging. And number three, election lessons for America from the land down under. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk. Thanks so much for tuning in. Well, you likely saw that Representative Amash, allegedly a Republican, he represents the area of Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's been in Congress, I think, 10 years. Like he was elected in the Tea Party thing in 2010 or so. In any case, he has come out saying that after having read the Mueller report, he believes, he said in a series of tweets, he believes essentially President Trump committed acts that are worthy of impeachment. So, of course, the mainstream media mob went crazy. Oh, my gosh, now things are starting to fall in line. Look at this, the first one to break ranks, and just acting like he was going to be the leader of the pack and he was going to lead the Republicans to stand up on the against President Trump and essentially seek impeachment over the Mueller report. And this is why on this Deep Dive Monday, I want to hit on this story. The beginning, this little segment in the first five is just about Justin Amash and who he really is. And then we'll turn a little later in this Deep Dive Monday and talk about where we are in the whole Spygate episode here in America. But on Justin Amash, he's a member of Congress. He has an R by his name. Very much a libertarian candidate and libertarian thinker. But he has reasons he does not like Trump and has not liked Trump pretty much since before Trump was even elected. Number one, Justin Amash, being a big libertarian, has attacked President Trump over his some tweet President Trump put out about something about flag burning. This is a couple of years or I don't know, during the campaign, I think, Trump saying, essentially doesn't like flag burning, understands it's protected by the First Amendment, but doesn't like it. And Representative Amash got all full of himself and just all on his high horse about this is just terrible. The First Amendment matters. I am an absolutist. First Amendment, you can say whatever you want. So kind of the point is, whatever way you think about whether people should be able to burn a flag and whether that should violate the First Amendment, he was looking for a way to belittle candidate Trump, looking for a way to attack him. Second thing on Justin Amash, he, as it turns out, being from Michigan, he's not actually, or his parents aren't actually Michigan natives. His, which was, I think it's his dad, no, his mom is a Syrian. She's from the country of Syria. She's a Syrian immigrant. The dad is a Palestinian refugee. So these are Middle Eastern refugees who now live in Michigan, who are his parents. So his sympathy toward the Middle East and toward the Muslim side of the Middle East caused the Devin Nunes, one of the most leaders of the Republican Party in the Congress, Devin Nunes referred to Amash as the Al-Qaeda's best friend in Congress. So President Trump very sideways with Justin Amash over the question of how America deals with the Islamic threat, and of course President Trump's great friendliness and friendship with Israel is another reason that Justin Amash is just weighed down on President Trump, because obviously Amash's dad, Palestinian refugee, Amash is very sympathetic with the Palestinians. Amash also spoke out vehemently against President Trump when he issued, at the very beginning of his presidency, President Trump issued executive orders relating to how adequately we vet immigrants seeking visas wanting to come to America when they're coming from countries filled with Islamic terror. We talked about those at that time and many times on this show that President Trump was essentially trying to say, we need to be sure before we let people in here where they stand on terrorism. Is Islamic terror something they are sympathetic to, or do they attend mosques or organizations, or are they participants in social media in some way in advocacy for Islamic terrorism? President Trump had several executive orders, finally got one to the Supreme Court, which said, what the law always was, which of course President Trump had the right to do that. But the point today is Justin Amash very sideways with President Trump over Islam because of his dad being a Palestinian refugee and his mom being a Syrian native. But third, and the other just current reason why Justin Amash is just looking for a reason to pile on President Trump is Justin Amash, as I said, from Michigan. He is the guy who's talking, coming out trying to be a big leader. Yes, we have to impeach the president. Well, it turns out that Justin Amash's family owns a tool manufacturing business, and those tools are manufactured in China. We are now in the midst of the President Trump negotiations with China. We've been talking about last several shows. We've been talking about different aspects of this, but President Trump is for the first time standing up for American interests and really cutting back at the unfairness of our trade relationship with China, which has been ongoing and growing for decades. So, Justin Amash, just to tell you a little detail, he has an ownership stake in Michigan Industrial Tools. He reports income of between $100,000 to $1 million. That was in his financial disclosure form in 2017. Point is, he makes his money through a company his family owns, multi-generational owns, that manufactures their tools in China. Justin Amash's financial interests will be harmed by potentially and likely through the trade deal that President Trump is working on with China. President Trump is not going to continue to permit China to take advantage of American companies, American interests, and these new trade deals that President Trump is working on are going to be very sideways to and harmful to Amash's interests, his financial interests. And I raised all this, I went through those in this first 5 today to say this. The American left is running scared now that Attorney General Barr has turned his massive intellect and the power of the investigation of the federal government into what created the whole Russia-Trump collusion hoax. What Attorney General Barr is doing, telling America what he's going to do. He's announcing what he's going to do. He is going to challenge he's doing investigations inside the FBI, understanding, we're going to play numerous clips in the next segment, but understand what Representative Amash is trying to say, that the Mueller report just mandates, it cries out, you got to do impeachment because, the Mueller report shows clearly things were done that justify impeachment. This has nothing to do with reality. This has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with what was in the Mueller report. It has everything to do with Justin Amash's connections and sympathy to the Palestinians, and therefore not so friendly to Israel. As his own colleague, Republican colleague in the Congress said, he's the best friend of Al-Qaeda that Al-Qaeda has in Congress. And his financial interests. Justin Amash is not speaking about in a fair-minded, reasonable way. He is not drawing a conclusion based on the content of the Mueller report. He's drawing a conclusion based on his own self-interests. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. I'm going to turn now today in this is a Deep Dive Monday. I love doing Deep Dive Monday. And on this Deep Dive Monday, I want to do a catch-up on where we are on the Mueller, the Spygate whole story. We've had so many different names for this amazing episode in Washington, Spygate, Muellergate, FISAgate. But I want to turn to where we are, because right now the Democrats are running scared. They finally have, you have to remember, all of this Russia-Trump collusion hoax cooked up inside the FBI. All of that happened at a time when most everyone in the country, in the world, thought that President Trump, that candidate Trump would never become President Trump, that all that they were doing would be swept under the rug because Hillary Clinton would be president, she'd come on board, and man, she would be just, she'd have no interest at all in investigating and finding out what happened inside the FBI as they cooked up this completely fraudulent charge against President Trump. And I want to get to one other point in the beginning of this conversation today before we dive into the comments I'm going to share with you from Attorney General Barr, from Trey Gowdy, who is now out of Congress, but Trey Gowdy was at the time the House Oversight Committee chair. He has some great insights. And also from one of the congressmen from Indiana, Illinois. I'm going to share some other insights from several of these people because I mainly want to get to the point. Many people are starting to realize that Attorney General Barr is serious on digging in and figuring out what happened inside the FBI. Jim Jordan's the third congressman. But I want to make this one point in the beginning and really have you, or urge you to think about this as kind of your framework of looking at what the charges that the left would now claim might be justified against President Trump. Imagine if you, minding your own business, sitting at home, and having done nothing wrong, became the subject of an FBI investigation. Imagine if it tore apart your life for 2 years. Imagine if you had to pay lawyers to defend you, and you had your credibility, your character, your integrity questioned on the front page of newspapers around the country and on every website imaginable that is political in nature, by every pundit, every political commentator was questioning your integrity and your honesty, and all the time you'd done nothing wrong. And then imagine, how you might respond. Most Americans, most human beings are not going to sit at home and say, well, golly gee willikers, I sure trust our system, I'm just going to be quiet. Now, you might be quiet because your lawyer says, you're better off not commenting right now, but the human instinct to defend yourself against a false charge is a human instinct basically everyone has. You would have, I would have, everyone would have. So what President Trump was doing as he's responding to all these allegations of Russia-Trump collusion and and the whole dossier. In fact, there was a great breakdown by Trey Gowdy about the dossier. I'll mention in a moment. But all of that coming out, and Trump is sitting in the White House, and he knows none of this happened. I didn't do any of these things. The idea that you might be inclined to defend yourself strongly, to challenge the integrity of the people making false accusations against you, to make strong statements about the need to demand truth, the need to call this hoax allegation against you, to call it a hoax, to call it fake news, to call it a witch hunt. Every American, human beings, you're inclined to do this. Everything that the Democrat media mob is now trying to claim might constitute the basis for impeachment against Trump is all based on Trump's efforts to defend himself, to lay out for the people, to expose for the American people, hey, this didn't happen. This is a hoax. This is fake. I didn't do this. What President Trump is doing is what you would do or I would do. You would defend yourself. The term obstruction of justice is being attached by the left-wing media mob and by the Democrats who will do anything in the world to remove President Trump from office. The term obstruction of justice is being attached to conduct, words, decisions that President Trump made, all part of his effort to defend himself, to speak up, to respond, to say, this did not happen, this is crazy. This is where we are right now in this Spygate mission. We're at the point where President Trump's efforts, since before he was even sworn in, since the time he was a candidate, his efforts to say, this is crazy, I didn't do this, none of this happened. And the Mueller report, my friends, has made clear none of that allegation happened. All that the people in Congress and even Justin Amash and others, all they're talking about is could they possibly find an impeachable offense out of President Trump's desire to defend himself and put the label obstruction of justice on it. Now, let's turn. I have a few clips from my extremely wonderful producer, Matt, who I believe has all these clips available. I want to start with the one we had. Justin Amash was making noises about the whole Mueller report and, how he'd read it, and that proved everything to him, doggone it. But I want to start instead with Attorney General Barr. And to be really clear, Attorney General Barr came into this effort after there was only an acting AG, and Jeff Sessions was gone, and Barr was brought in to be the Attorney General. And the Mueller report's completed. Barr put out his 4-page summary, essentially saying Mueller found nothing impeachable, nothing. He found there was no Russian collusion and there was no basis for obstruction charges. This is what Barr communicated. And so now the whole Mueller report is out, and with tiny bits of redactions. People have read it. There's nothing in there, but still the left has nothing to say, nothing to talk about politically, unless they can continue their witch hunt march to somehow remove Trump based on this Mueller report about the non-existent Trump-Russia collusion. But turning to Attorney General Barr, here he is talking. There is actually 2 clips. It's first Attorney General Barr, a little clip of what he had to say in a great interview over the weekend, and then what Jim Jordan, who's a fabulous Republican congressman, had to say as a follow-up. But here is William Barr.
The fact of the matter is, Bob Mueller did not look at the government's activities. He was not going back and looking at the counterintelligence program. And we have a number of investigations underway that touch upon it, the main one being the Office of Inspector General that's looking at the FISA warrants. But as far as I'm aware, no one has really looked across the whole waterfront.
The short answer is we don't know. What I do know is Bill Barr is not just serious. I think he's very serious. He said in his interview with Bill Hemmer that someone may have put their thumb on the scale. He's concerned about that. Did that actually happen? When you take that statement and couple it with what he said 4 weeks ago in front of the Senate, when he said that he felt there was a failure of leadership at the upper echelon of the FBI, that was certainly the case. He said spying did occur. There's a basis for his concern about the spying that took place. And then probably fourth and most importantly, he used 2 terms that should scare every American. He talked about unauthorized surveillance and potential political surveillance. So I think he is starting from the right premise, and he is very serious about finding out what exactly took place when they launched this whole Trump-Russia investigation in the first place.
Hearing, first of all, that last gentleman is Jim Jordan, fabulous congressman, and he's been one who has been standing up for President Trump and trying to get after the FBI and Department of Justice to find out how did this get started. That he's been one of the ones just digging, subpoenaing, trying to get the Justice Department to cooperate, the FBI to cooperate with Congress's investigation, which they did not. The FBI stalled, hid things, just would not cooperate with the investigation. The FBI recognizing that what they did not want the American people to understand what they did, this whole collusion thing they cooked up. So that was Jim Jordan. Then I want to turn again to William Barr. Again, he was interviewed, an extensive interview over the weekend, basically saying, I'm going to dig in. I'm going to figure out what happened here. And this is what I'm telling you, my friends, the Democrat and especially the leadership, the people who know what really happened, which is most of the American left, along with their allies in the mainstream media, they realize they have a serious problem on their hands if this guy digs in and figures out all the facts. Here's Attorney General Barr.
Well, the first step is find out exactly what happened. And we're trying to get our arms around that, getting all the relevant information from the various agencies and starting to talk to some of the people that have information. The thing that's interesting about this is that this was handled at a very senior level of these departments. It wasn't handled in the ordinary way that investigations or counterintelligence activities are conducted. It was sort of an ad hoc small group, and most of these people are no longer with the FBI or the CIA or the other agencies involved. There are 2 things here. One, no one's really looked at it. I think there's a misconception out there that we know a lot about what happened. The fact of the matter is, Bob Mueller did not look at the government's activities. He was looking at whether or not the Trump campaign had conspired with the Russians, but he was not going back and looking at the counterintelligence program. I've been trying to get answers to questions, and I found that a lot of the answers have been inadequate. And I've also found that some of the explanations I've gotten don't hang together. So in a sense, I have more questions today than I did when I first started, because I think people have to find out what the government was doing during that period. If we're worried about foreign influence, for the very same reason, we should be worried about whether government officials abuse their power and put their thumb on the scale. And so I'm not saying that happened, but I'm saying that we have to look at that.
I'm telling you, folks, the American left, the people in Congress who are somewhat aware, the people inside the FBI, whether they're still there or they've left, the higher echelon who cooked up this hoax, cooked up this collusion, and it appears overwhelmingly clear that committed crimes along the way doing that, including, as the allusion was made to earlier, the FISA warrant applications require the agents to sign under penalty of perjury. Comey signed some of those FISA warrant applications. So they've lied to the court on this Russian dossier, which Trey Gowdy had a great description, a great point about this Russian dossier. He was saying, when we use the word dossier, it sounds like, wow, that's a pretty official word. That sounds like a formal thing, like a doctor, like something, an official document, a court filing. The dossier is a fancy name for a bunch of stuff, junk, that this Christopher Steele dug up, stories, unproven, unprovable, some proven false, just a concoction of garbage created by Christopher Steele, but put together in a fancy thing called the dossier, and then passed around Washington, ultimately used as the basis for a FISA warrant application and the issuance by the FISA court of warrants permitting the ongoing spying by the federal government on the Trump campaign. So this is how serious it is and where we are. And you heard Attorney General Barr made a comment a moment ago. He was in our little clip there. He was saying, that investigation is ongoing for sure. What exactly was in the warrant applications? Because what he's really saying is, who lied? Who signed saying, oh, yeah, this is, because if you don't listen to our show regularly, I'll tell you that we've had on the show former FBI agents and people who can tell you what has to be done to get any FISA warrant application submitted, to get a warrant issued by the court to allow spying. You have to verify your sources. You're often asked to go back and double check your sources. And the FISA court is often asking, hey, I know you said this, but did you ask this? I mean, this was a bunch of garbage put together by the FBI. This dossier was it's like collecting a bunch of gossip, slapping it together into some document and using it to get warrants. So these are penalty perjury for one thing. I'm sure there are other crimes related to seeking those FISA court warrants. That's just one piece of what Attorney General Barr is looking into. The American left is getting very, very, very nervous because this scandal, this effort was the effort to unseat the duly elected president of the United States. It was a coup from inside the FBI. And before President Trump won the election, it was intended to be the corruption of the FBI and their power as the national intelligence agency, a law enforcement agency, corrupting their use, corrupting their existence for the end of destroying a political opponent, the political opponent of the then incumbent President Obama. This is the biggest scandal in American history. And you're going to start hearing the left. In fact, I'm going to tell you in a moment something that Eric Holder is saying. But I'm getting at the point that the left is getting concerned. They're getting worried. Attorney General Barr, you see him very plain spoken, very deliberate, very relentless. He's not a flippant guy, and he's not a smooth talking. He's serious. He's substantive. He's been FBI director before. He knows the law, and he understands that you simply. He's been Attorney General before. He understands the law. And he is, I'm telling you, my read of him, he already knows what happened. He's got to fill in the details of his investigation. He knows what inside the FBI and the DOJ, what they did to candidate Trump and President Trump, and he's digging it out, and the left is getting very, very nervous. And I want to turn to something else. It's a little bit of a detail, but it ties back to something a couple weeks ago, or last week, I think, we talked about in the show, just one character in this massive conspiracy to get Trump. One character involved was George Papadopoulos, and we went through his story in this, I think, maybe last Wednesday. Anyway, if you're on my Facebook or YouTube channel, you can scroll down and find the segment about George Papadopoulos. But the point is, George Papadopoulos was a guy, really a minor player in the Trump campaign, but his statements at a couple of different meetings were what allegedly led the FBI to believe there was a serious problem related to whether the Trump campaign had or could have had or was working in some way with the Russians to get Hillary Clinton's emails, the DNC's emails. So this is the guy lured in, originally duped by the FBI. He's a guy, finally, he kind of realized what was happening, and he's the one that gave him the suitcase full of money and the $10,000, and he left it with his lawyer in Greece. He didn't even fly home with it because he realized this is a setup in some way. Well, the whole George Papadopoulos thing was the beginning of the FBI, their claim that that's when they knew they had to launch an investigation. What has become obvious is the FBI concocted the whole George Papadopoulos scenario, meaning they did not get information innocently about Papadopoulos and that causing them to realize, oh, we better start an investigation. They set up Papadopoulos. They set up the whole thing so Papadopoulos would say things or appear to say things that they could report back to Washington and say, oh my gosh, we got a big problem here. This Clinton, this Trump ally has, Papadopoulos guy is making noises about the Hillary Clinton emails. We think maybe we got to do an investigation. So Trey Gowdy is onto this. Trey Gowdy, former, he was the chair of the House Oversight and Investigations Committee. In an interview this weekend, he was talking about how this attempted entrapment of George Papadopoulos by the FBI and possibly even the CIA's involvement. My words, not his. He didn't say CIA in this interview, but CIA was behind it all, it appears. But the point is, Trey Gowdy, former prosecutor, former chairman of the House Oversight Committee, is making the point he has seen many of the documents that have not yet been released publicly. He has seen documents of the connection between the FBI and Papadopoulos. I'm going to play his little segment here. Here's Trey Gowdy. We'll come back and talk about him.
There are a lot of serious questions that need to be asked. When did the Russia probe begin? When did it become hopelessly commingled with the Trump campaign? What was the factual predicate? Where are the transcripts, if any, exist between the informants and the telephone calls to George Papadopoulos? Why the defensive briefing so inadequate of President Trump? Why didn't you do a follow-up defensive briefing? That doesn't even get to the whole FISA story in the fall. That's just the spring and summer of 2016. Yeah, if the Bureau is going to send an informant in, the informant's going to be wired. And if the Bureau is monitoring telephone calls, there's going to be a transcript of that. And some of us have been fortunate enough to know whether or not those transcripts exist, but they haven't been made public. And I think one in particular it has the potential to actually persuade people. Very little on this Russia probe, I'm afraid, is going to persuade people who hate Trump or who love Trump. But there is some information in these transcripts that I think has the potential to be a game changer if it's ever made public.
He goes on from this interview, he goes on and talks about how he's read all the transcripts that relate to Papadopoulos and his communications with the FBI. And he's more or less implying what you just heard. And I couldn't play the whole long interview, but he's more or less implying that when Congress, all the Congress and the public finally has access to the transcripts of the conversations between the FBI and Papadopoulos, it's going to become obvious that exculpatory evidence, and they're meaning evidence that therefore means Papadopoulos should never been prosecuted, and also that the whole Papadopoulos thing was a setup by the FBI to give them the justification to begin the investigation of President Trump, and to therefore just the ongoing, relentless Russia-Trump collusion hoax thing going on and on and on. The other piece about this is that I say that the left is getting nervous and anxious. They're about being driven out of their minds. They cannot believe that all of this is apparently going to be unearthed. So there was a I'm going to refer back to Eric Holder. He was as you know, the Attorney General under President Obama. So last month, when Barr testified at the Senate hearing, and Barr said he was pressed, and I don't know if the Senate or House, anyway, do you really believe was there spying on President Trump during the campaign? And Barr was trying to be circumspect. He wasn't trying to be accusatory, but he said, well, yeah, yes, I think there was. The question was there a sufficient predicate? Was there a reason that the government can't just start spying on people? They have to have probable cause, some predicate, some reason to start doing that. And so that's what he's saying. We're trying to figure out what was that reason. So right after that testimony by Attorney General Barr, former Attorney General Eric Holder took to Twitter to mock Attorney General Barr and say essentially, and in fact he said, this is Eric Holder, Obama's Attorney General, attacking Attorney General Barr, saying about Barr's claim that the Trump campaign was spied on by the FBI. And here's this comment by Eric Holder was, it's really snarky. It's called investigating, not spying. And he went on to just mock Barr for calling it spying, and you just can't, just mocking the idea that the Attorney General would dare accuse the FBI of spying. He's talking like you can't really accuse the FBI of spying. I mean, you can't mean that. And it's called investigating. Eric Holder. And again, the Democrat leadership in Washington, the cabal inside the FBI, all of those people are getting nervous because Attorney General Barr is unflapped by their mockery, unflapped by their criticism. He's just going to keep looking. And so, again, just a couple days ago, or over the weekend, Eric Holder had some just new, super snarky attack out, really slamming Attorney General Barr, really trying to say, this guy is out of line, he's crazy. And, I'm telling you, it's because they're getting nervous. My friends, you gotta believe they're getting nervous. They cannot believe that this whole thing they cooked up. First, they still can't believe Hillary lost, which would have then, made all of their efforts hidden forever because, Hillary's in, they're not going to investigate anything. But then Trump wins, and then Trump survives this, 2-year-plus assault on him, on his campaign. Finally gets a Mueller report, which, involved, we talked about many times, it was like 19 lawyers, all of the left-leaning, Obama-supporting, Hillary Clinton-supporting lawyers, the worst, the nastiest of lawyers imaginable, put on Mueller's team, the people who are vindictive-type lawyer investigators just looking to get something to get somebody. They had hundreds of depositions and thousands of documents and hours and hours of investigation, and they finally had to say, okay, there's nothing there. Now, I think there was talk earlier that the Mueller investigation would continue into the fall of this year, but I think it's a very strategic decision. They finally had to say, you know what? The American public is going to have to get used to the idea, going to have to be told there was actually nothing to this. And so strategically, I think they decided, tell them earlier, tell them now, let's get over it. We'll get over all the, the blowback and the pushback that, hey, because this has been really the argument of the left since the moment Trump won, is it couldn't have been legitimate. He must have cheated. It had to be the Russians. So now they failed in their effort to take him down through this accusation about Russia-Trump collusion. And now they're trying to move forward. But maybe this obstruction thing, which means maybe he should be charged for defending himself. Maybe he should be charged because he dared to say, hey, wait a minute, this is a witch hunt, this is a hoax. And so now they finally got, the tables have been turned. Attorney General Barr is looking into it, and I think a lot of people are very, very, very nervous, as they well should be. I'll close out this section by saying it's really important to recognize that you are going to hear more and more of the Eric Holder style comment, mockery, tweets, questions, just belligerent dismissal and condescending dismissal of the effort of Attorney General Barr to get to the bottom of this. They're going to try to, in fact, there have already been accusations from some leftists about how, Barr is just acting as, in fact, as a Democrat member of Congress, Attorney General Barr is just acting as a defender of Trump. Everything he's doing is just to defend Trump. This isn't fair. This isn't right, blah, 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 blah. They are shaking in their boots, and they should be. And it is really important, whether you are a Democrat, Republican, a conservative, a liberal, whatever your political leanings are, it's important if we want to have a country founded on the rule of law. If we actually want to have a country that we can rely on the rule of law, which, while never perfect, is the best system on earth, always try to improve it, but best system on earth. If we want that system to continue, we have to have a full vindication, a full investigation, a full exposure, transparency to everything that happened inside the FBI, a cleaning out of the upper echelons of the FBI, because otherwise this kind of conduct will go unrebuked, unchastened. They'll move on, and that this will be something that becomes a norm of behavior, an okay thing to do inside the FBI, and we cannot have that in this precious country. Last story for today, I want to turn to and talk about, there was an election in Australia, and the reason I want to talk about is several things about this election. Number one is that in this show, I talk. My show is dedicated to America. It's always about preserving this country, and I do talk about political parties, but I'm really always trying to talk about policies and ideas and just values that undergird freedom, values that undergird what we have in this precious, unique experiment in human liberty called America. And I use the expression the American left, but actually leftism or radical leftism, just leftism, is very different from being kind of a liberal Democrat. Leftism is an international phenomenon. It is happening all over the world. It exists all over the world. It's happening all over the world. The push of the leftists in this world is more cohesive and more similar, even in very different countries, similar to what's happening in other countries. What leftists do in Australia, they do in America. What leftists do in America, they are doing in the European Union. That's why we had George Farmer in the show last week, and he was the one talking about the upcoming EU elections, European Union, how many countries who are going to be electing representatives to the EU are electing people who want to stand against the leftism of the EU, the big government power, the crushing of the national identity of each individual country. Countries in Europe are recognizing they have to stand up for themselves and against leftism, against the leftism that is the EU, and it's a force all over the world. Okay, so in Australia they had their elections, and the polls shockingly were wrong. But the polls in Australia were wrong, and here's what really happened and why it matters to America's elections. So Prime Minister Scott Morrison was reelected for a 3-year term. He's been there a little less than 9 months, I think, or something. But anyway, he is the Prime Minister. He was reelected, even though the poll said he wasn't going to win. And he's close in his party's leadership, his coalition. They have all these parties, they have coalitions, but the coalition is close to having a majority in their parliament, like their Congress. They're getting closer to having a majority of this coalition that is more, and what this coalition and what these people are all about, they're very similar to the Trump and the phenomenon America. And by that I mean this. One of the ideas that this coalition party, and they call it the Liberal National Coalition, but they don't mean liberal like, leftism. They mean liberal like open-minded thinking type, reasonable people. So Liberal National Coalition in Australia, they are only a few seats short. They need 76 to have a majority in the parliament. I think they have 73 or something now, and they're still counting votes. This guy ran on some platforms that are exactly the issues facing us in America. Number one, Australians first. Wonder where he got that. Australians first. The idea it's okay for your country to stand up for your people. Like President Trump says, American first. America first, like the EU candidates, like we had George Farmer on, and others are saying they want to represent their country in the EU Parliament, but they want to stand up for their country's identity. It's not racist, it's not about race, it's not about skin color, it is about the culture of their countries. They want to represent the culture of their countries, like America wants the America First idea, the culture of freedom, free markets, independence, strong national defense, all the things that we are in America. Second thing that happened in the Australian election was that there's a massive, just as there is in America, a massive left-wing environmental socialist cabal. And in America, environmentalism is all wrapped up in socialism. The alleged mission of cleaning the environment and environmental improvement is tied up in socialism in Australia, just like in America, as you see with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, outspoken socialist, same with Bernie Sanders. They're both huge alleged environmentalists. Environmentalism is the current vehicle, is the vehicle of today to bring socialism, to force socialism on people through the vehicle of convincing them they're voting really to protect the environment. Well, in Australia, you had the environmentalists pushing, and you had this party that won, this Scott Morrison and his party, talking about your pocketbook, talking about what would happen to jobs in the energy industry if you let the environmental radicals have their way. And turns out, pocketbook issues, paycheck issues, what's in your wallet, the money you can bring home to take care of your family, the security of your job was more important to the Australian people than the radical left environmentalist agenda. The people saw through it. The people saw it was not something they wanted to have. So the save the planet versus save your job wins. Well, a couple other lessons from Australia, but I'm going to put them off till next week. But it was a great example of the idea that really in the human heart, people want their country to mean something. They want their identity of their country to mean something. They are actually smarter than the left-wing extremists think they are. They do not buy into radical environmentalism. And sometimes I think you can look at the environmental movement and people feel like, oh, everyone's behind it and I'm the only one saying, it seems like the Green New Deal is pretty extreme. We really have to do that. The American people are just as smart, or even smarter, than the Australians. They will see through this if we have brave politicians willing to speak up and show the farce, the just extreme nature of the environmental movement in the world today. And when people speak up against socialism and in favor of freedom and free markets, the people will respond. And I think we're going to see that in the EU elections in I think it's May 26th, next week. May 26th, they're coming right up. And so we're going to have those elections too. Same kind of arguments there as you're seeing in Australia and in America. And if you go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, on homepage under shows, go down under list of links, you'll see a lot of articles laying out more detail of the stories that we talked about today. And now, for the end of the show, which I love to do every week, I want to talk about why the stories we talked about today matter to you. To start with, Justin Amash, the alleged Republican from Grand Rapids, Michigan, already getting primaried, but he supported Trump. He opposed Trump's travel ban and his refugee ban from the inception. He opposes Trump's tariffs on China because they're bad for his multi-generation family business, which is selling tools made in and imported from China. And by the way, on that one, he got caught in a campaign. His company used to say, made in America. And they had to go, well, okay, never mind. They're not really made in America, they're made in China. So he got caught in that kind of dishonesty. Okay, next on Amash. Why this really matters to you? He's all bothered by this obstruction of justice, just stunningly obtuse. Trump was framed. He was entrapped by the CIA, FBI, DOJ. He rightfully objected to this monstrous injustice, and his objection to being lied about is what's being called obstruction. Amash appears, he's an opportunist, a hypocrite politician, hiding his motives behind high-minded words that are nonsense. Ignore him. He is not leading the charge of the Republicans away from Trump. He is an outlier and a selfishly motivated representative. Next story, Spygate, truth will out. I'm telling you, folks, the truth is going to come out. Why it matters to you. This is the worst scandal in American political history by far. The Democrats are increasingly frantic and hysterical. They can't admit it. They can't explain away the truth, and we can't let them try. Okay, next slide. We have on Spygate, also why it matters, more finger pointing, more blame shifting, anything to avoid admitting the out and out lies and corruption of the Obama administration officials. Just this is what's happening. The Democrats are just flabbergasted. They don't know what to do. We have to demand accountability if we're going to have rule of law. Attorney General Barr knows this. Americans must demand it. Last slide, surprise election in Australia. Not really a surprise. A surprise, I guess, like President Trump's victory was a surprise. Like his victory was a surprise. The truth is, people like the messages of, we love our country. America first, Australia first. We love our country. We love our national identity. People will respond to that. The globalists, we're all the same. All cultures are the same. All, there's nothing special about America, nothing special about Australia. People don't like that leftist message that is just thrown at us day after day after day. This political polling has become a joke. Don't be influenced. Climate alarmism lost. Common sense won. American voters should trust their instincts. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who said 12 years, we only have 12 years to live. She's now trying to backpedal and say, no, I didn't really mean that. Of course she did. But anyway, it's hysterical nonsense driven by the leftist control agenda. We must reject it. Responsible environmental care is possible without Green New Deal silliness. My friends, I love talking with you every day, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, right here. My show is America Can We Talk. You can find us on Facebook Live on America Can We Talk, at our YouTube channel, if that's where you're watching. Love your comments. Love your emails. You can email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. And I'm here every day to talk with you about the extraordinary blessing we have of being in the role of defending, speaking up for, and protecting this precious, extraordinary country, United States of America. Talk to you tomorrow.
America, can we talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear